Well, the question of is Kevin Stefanski on the hot seat might be a short-lived question at the end of the day. They were on Get Up. NFL insider Adam Schefter was asked this question about Kevin Stefanski, his status, his security with the organization, and if he's heard anything about the Browns wanting to move off. This was his response.
Quick note as we look forward to tonight on this game from the other side. I know you had in the meeting this morning, we were talking about from the Cleveland coaching side.
Well, there's a lot of people making noise about Kevin Stefanski being on the hot seat, and I don't quite understand it, considering that he signed an extension in June. He's a two-time Coach of the Year, and my understanding is they're not doing anything right now, despite all the noise about the Browns potentially making a coaching change. Not happening.
All right, so that's Adam Schefter, and that's a pretty definitive answer for him, right? Like, that's not him leaving room for there to potentially be meat on that bone. That's him stating the facts outright, maybe even parroting an argument that he's heard from somebody in the Cleveland Browns organization, acknowledging that there's been a lot of noise about potentially Kevin Stefanski being fired because it looked like there was going to be a serious chance that this team falls under a 300 win percentage. We know how teams usually operate when a coach is under 300. Kevin Stefanski is at risk of doing that right now. Now, winning against Pittsburgh obviously changes the math quite a bit on this, but he's putting together the argument that he's a two-time Coach of the Year. He just signed his contract. And the key words there are my understanding. So this is not just, okay, this is my synopsis of the situation from the outside looking in. He's saying, I'm not hearing anything when I ask people about this, because he is hearing a bunch of noise. If Adam Schefter's hearing a ton of noise, he's going to ask the people in the building about it. Like, hey, is there something to this? And he's getting back no responses that makes him think that anything is on the table for the Cleveland Browns. And remember, this is before the Browns played on Thursday night, beat the Pittsburgh Steelers, and advanced to 3-6. My whole thing with the Browns is if they finish strong, Kevin Stefanski has absolutely nothing to worry about. The question was like, hey, if you do get embarrassed against Pittsburgh on Monday night, yeah, you might not be planning to do anything, but things have a way of going down after you lose to Pittsburgh on Monday. I mean, not on Monday night, but on national TV in Cleveland. Now let's move over to the second part, right? Because there's been a lot of talk about, is the overall record going to be something that puts Kevin on the hot seat? I think the indicator from at least Adam Schefter and the fact that, like, there's not a lot of local beat reporters even really floating out this story. Like even Mary Kay's not even trying to like sneak this one out here. It tells me that there's not a lot of whole smoke to Kevin Stefanski potentially being on the hot seat. I think there's good reason for that, because if we talk about if Kevin should be on the hot seat and what Kevin has proven over the last 4 years, yeah, he's had a couple of 11-win seasons. He's also had some down seasons. We also got to talk about this, right? This is something I brought up during the game on Thursday, and it's something that continues to be true. In the Deshaun Watson era, when you look at quarterbacks who have started like more than just a couple of games, right? Like I would say the PJ Walker line, right? PJ Walker started like 3 games, more than PJ Walker started. When you look at the quarterbacks who have started that amount of games in the Deshaun Watson era that aren't named Deshaun Watson, literally every single one of them are local legends by the time they're done in Cleveland, right? We can look at Jameis Winston right now. I mean, a heroic performance and all that snow. Yeah, man, these fans gonna love him forever. You could look at Joe Flacco, that run he went on at the end of last year. The fans love him forever. Even somebody like Jacoby Brissett, who did not have the win-loss record that maybe Jameis has, but Joe Flacco had. You look at him, and the fans were in love with him as well. And it's not just that people like these quarterbacks' personalities. It's that there has been a consistent through line. When you put the quarterbacks that are of that type, right? We talked about this. Jameis Winston, Joe Flacco, and Jacoby Brissett. They all get things done just a little bit differently, but they're all more similar than they are different. They're all pocket quarterbacks. They're all quarterbacks who thrive in play action. They're guys who can play in a structured system, veteran quarterbacks who know where to look and know how to take coaching. All of those things end up fitting much better. Like every single one of these guys in the natural Kevin Stefanski offense, even before Deshaun Watson's play fell off a cliff in 2024, felt like much more easy fits into what Kevin and his offensive coordinator are trying to do. Jameis Winston is a great example of that. We'll get into that. But Jacoby Brissett, it felt that way. We kind of wrote it off as Deshaun coming back from 700-day layoff. Same thing happened with Joe Flacco last year, but Deshaun wasn't awful in 2023. So really, like, his win-loss record was fine. Like, we weren't really like, yeah, people made the point, but it was worth seeing what Deshaun Watson can do coming off of that injury, given how well the team had played and what their point differential was with Deshaun in 2023. Then you go to 2024, his play falls off a roof. I don't know if there's an offense that he would have looked good in 2024, if I'm being honest with you. And then you see Jameis Winston come in, and it's just so starkly different yet again. Jameis Winston, since week 8, he's number 11th in Pro Football Focus grades. And Deshaun Watson was number 26 in his 7 weeks out there. If you look at the yardage, Deshaun Watson was 25th in the NFL in passing yards. Jameis Winston is number 2 in the NFL in passing yards. Now, that does include Thursday night, but remember, Jameis had a bye week in the middle of that sample, so it is fair to add that Thursday night game to what he's done. If you look at first downs, he's number 5 in first downs in the NFL. Deshaun Watson was 24th. If you look at PFF grade in play action, Jameis Winston is number 5. Deshaun Watson was number 30, right? Like, the level of play individually at the quarterback position seems to have made a great level of difference when it comes to the passing game's ability to produce. Straight up. You literally went from 25th in the NFL in passing yards to, with Jameis Winston, your second. And you traded Amari Cooper in the middle of that. Like, keep that in mind, right, when we're talking about this whole thing. Amari Cooper was traded, and he only played in the Deshaun Watson sample, and Deshaun Watson was still significantly lower in passing yards relative to his peers than Jameis Winston is right now. Again, 25th in the league to 2nd in the league with Jameis Winston since starting him in week 8. That is a significant difference, right? Number 5 in the NFL in first downs. This team's still bad on third down, but they are number 5 in the league in first downs, which means that they're not getting to third down just as much. Deshaun was 24th. So if we're looking at who to blame for the offensive struggles throughout the first 7 weeks of the season, a little bit goes on the offensive line. Well, not a little bit. A good amount goes on the offensive line. Maybe a little bit on the coaching staff, but let's be honest about it. Deshaun couldn't execute the offense. That's the biggest problem. Deshaun consistently has not been able to execute the offense, even when he's played well or better than what people thought in 2023. He has not executed the offense at the same level as his backups in his 3 years here. And that, to me, demonstrates that it's not coaching that's been the problem offensively, right? I've been going back and forth on this because I really want to think this out, right? The Saints game left such a bad taste in my mouth that I wanted to reevaluate my whole stance because I've always been more leaning towards the side of Kevin's a good coach. So I want to reevaluate it this week. And everything I come back to tells me this ain't on Kevin, man. Like, really, if you think about it, none of this feels like it's on Kevin, right? Even if we're like, oh, well, maybe Kevin's making Deshaun do this. There's no evidence of that, right? Deshaun was at 65% of his passes, short to intermediate. He only threw 17.7% of his passes in the intermediate part of the field. Jameis Winston is up to 28. And he's doing well in intermediate passing, which tells me that there's a lot there, right? Like Jerry Jeudy looks so much better with Jameis. Cedric Tillman looks so much better. Elijah Moore looks so much better. All of your wide receivers look better with the guy that's not being paid to make your wide receivers look better. That to me suggests that it's not the offense that's the issue. It's not the people in charge of the offense that's the issue. It's just the dude who's playing quarterback that's the main issue. Is the offensive line helping things? No, the offensive line obviously needs to be retooled over the summer, right? But the main thing, and I said this in my video about things that need to be changed, the main thing is you just can't put Deshaun Watson out there anymore. He's not an option to start. He's not good enough to start anymore. And if that means you got to pay a guy $46 million a year for the next 2 years to sit on the bench, you do that. If that means you pay him $46 million a year to be in sweats, you do that, because it literally makes you a better football team than playing him. That is what has been proven. And he's coming off an Achilles injury, which means he's going to be probably, if we're just talking about the statistics of the whole thing, more useless than before. And brother, he was useless in 2024. I mean, beyond useless in 2024. It would be miraculous if he got back to being just a nuisance, right, to your offense, let alone useless. But he's just there. That's just where we're at with him, right? It's obvious that the team's issues when it came to passing production was not because Kevin and Ken Dorsey could not competently put together a passing offense. It seems like they have no problem, or Kevin especially has no problem. When he's collaborating with Ken Dorsey, he puts together a competent offense. When he's collaborating with Alex Van Pelt, they put together a functional offense, right? I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time speaking right now because I'm recording this right after the Browns game. It's like 2 a.m. So I'm a little bit tired. But he has not demonstrated an inability to do that. The only person who's demonstrated an inability to execute an offense is Deshaun Watson, right? So if you fire Kevin Stefanski, what are you firing him for? The team's culture seems fine. You see how the veterans rallied around everybody to come out against Pittsburgh and get an upset win in a fun snow game. So it tells you that Kevin hasn't lost the locker room. That was the one concern after the Saints game. Did Kevin lose the locker room? It seems obvious he hasn't, right? Like the guys came out immediately and started talking about winning and why they need to win. And that was Joel and Miles doing that. Like all of the leaders of the team kind of stood behind Kevin this week. And it seems like they showed up to play this week when they heard all that noise about people wanting to fire him, telling them that they think that he's lost the locker room. He has not lost the locker room. He clearly has the ear and the respect of everybody in that locker room still. So if that's not the case, he hasn't lost the locker room. If his ability as an offensive coordinator or as an offensive collaborator isn't really in question, because with Jameis Winston, he has Jameis Winston performing at a top 11 rate in the NFL right now since he started, right? The Browns are number 2 in passing yards and number 5 in first down since they just simply switched quarterbacks. Does not seem like, to me, it's the offense that's the issue. Is the defense underperforming and struggling? Sure, but do you want to fire Jim Schwartz over that? Like, that doesn't seem like a good decision. He just won Coordinator of the Year last year. He's a veteran coach. He's had good years. He's had bad years. You assume, based on his track record, he's going to be able to easily bounce back after all of this. And if he gets a better year from certain defensive guys, and if you're able to retool some things defensively, he'll probably be able to produce better defense. Yeah, does Bubba Ventrone need to go? Absolutely. Right? Nobody's doubting that. But if you look at the coaching staff, I don't really want to fire Jim Schwartz based off performance, given how good this defense was the year prior. If I look at the offense, I see no reason to not think that the offensive struggles in the first 8 weeks of the season, 7 weeks of the season, weren't massively influenced by Deshaun Watson rather than like the offensive scheme or play calling. Like, it seems obvious when you look at these differences between Watson and Winston when they were out there. The fact that Winston has already surpassed Deshaun Watson in passing yards and touchdowns, despite only starting 4 games when Deshaun started 7, kind of tells me everything I need to know, right? About what was the problem on the Browns offense. We can act like other parts were a significant part of the issue. Yes, the offensive line stinks. It stunk back then when Deshaun was playing. It stinks now. I mean, Jermaine Ifedi's playing left tackle for you. But still, the offense is able to produce, even in a blizzard, at a higher rate than Deshaun Watson did. And this is against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like, think about the games that the Browns have played. They played like one team since Jameis Winston has took over that was not a playoff team. They've played the Ravens. They played the best defense in the NFL, the Los Angeles Chargers. And then they played the Saints, who aren't one of the best defenses in the NFL, definitively. But then came back, played the Steelers, who are one of the best defenses in the NFL, in a blizzard. Still, in every single one of those games, significantly more productive than they ever were with Deshaun Watson. Every single game Jameis Winston has played, over 200 yards passing. Better than Deshaun. Deshaun never got to 200 yards. The problems of the Browns offense, yeah, in the first 7 weeks of the season, some of it's on the offensive line, but those problems still exist for the Cleveland Browns, right? Some of it might have been on the wide receivers, but like, you traded Amari Cooper. Like, every single excuse you've had for Deshaun Watson and why he was that unproductive in the first 7 weeks, that was not on Deshaun himself, right? The offensive line, the wide receivers stink, all of this stuff. Those problems have gotten worse. And yet they're still more productive, right? The left tackle situation's down to Jermaine Ifedi. You've lost Amari Cooper. So, like, if you were complaining about the wide receivers, you lost one of your better wide receivers. Traded him. Right now you're down to Jerry Jeudy, Elijah Moore, and Cedric Tillman, still more productive. Hell, they look way better now than they did before. I mean, the common denominator is obvious. Yes, there's some other issues going on with this team that they obviously need to address in the draft, but quarterback has to be the number one most pressing issue. And as long as Kevin and Andrew Berry do not go into this offseason under the delusion that they can fix Deshaun Watson still, I will be fine with them staying. I think that would be a good thing for this team, as long as they can continue to have these respectful efforts every time they go out there, right? I don't want to see them lay an egg on Monday night. I want to see them continue to play with the same spirit that they played with this week. But that's my thoughts on this whole thing. Hopefully they play well for the rest of the year and we don't even have a single thought about Kevin losing his job at the end of the year, because I think having a good coach and a good GM in a system that you trust, that stuff's going to help you, quote unquote, rebuild a lot faster than if you got to start over from scratch when it comes to head coach and general manager. So I'm rooting for the Browns, obviously. I'm a Browns fan, and I want what's best for them, and I think this is what's best for them. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.